In this podcast episode, Jordan Peterson engages in a discussion with Matthew Goodwin, a political scientist and former professor who has transitioned into a more public role in political campaigning. The conversation delves into the current state of the UK, focusing on the perceived rot within its political and academic institutions, the rise of the Reform Party, and the harrowing issue of rape gangs that have plagued British society. Goodwin begins by reflecting on his disillusionment with academia, where he spent 2 decades. He notes a significant shift in universities, which have increasingly lost their commitment to the pursuit of truth and objective knowledge. Instead, they have become ideologically rigid, prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion over rigorous academic standards. This shift has led to a culture where dissenting voices are silenced, and many academics, including Goodwin, have faced harassment for expressing views that contradict the prevailing orthodoxy. The conversation then transitions to the broader political landscape in the UK, where Goodwin argues that both the Conservative and Labour parties have become indistinguishable in their embrace of radical, progressive policies. He criticizes the elite class for imposing policies such as mass immigration and the net zero agenda without considering the consequences for ordinary citizens. Goodwin believes that this disconnect has fueled a growing backlash among voters who feel ignored and marginalized. One of the most disturbing topics discussed is the issue of rape gangs in the UK, which Goodwin describes as a national scandal that has been largely ignored by the political elite. He outlines the systematic sexual exploitation of vulnerable young white working-class girls by predominantly Pakistani Muslim gangs, a crisis that has persisted for decades. Goodwin emphasizes that the failure to address this issue is a result of political correctness and a fear of being labeled racist or Islamophobic. He highlights the tragic stories of victims, many of whom were subjected to horrific abuse, and points out that the media and political institutions have largely failed to bring attention to their plight. Goodwin argues that the reluctance to confront this issue stems from a broader cultural reluctance to discuss uncomfortable truths, particularly when they involve race and immigration. Amidst this backdrop of political and social turmoil, Goodwin expresses optimism about the emergence of the Reform Party in the UK, which he believes represents a genuine alternative to the established political order. He describes the party as a vehicle for change that prioritizes the concerns of ordinary citizens over the interests of the elite. Goodwin sees the Reform Party as a movement that can unite disillusioned voters from both the left and right, focusing on issues such as immigration control, economic reform, and a rejection of the net zero agenda. Goodwin's association with the Reform Party is rooted in his belief that it can effectively address the pressing issues facing the UK. He argues that the party's platform resonates with the majority of voters who feel that their voices have been ignored by the traditional parties. He emphasizes the importance of popular sovereignty, asserting that the true power of governance should lie with the people rather than a distant elite. The discussion also touches on the broader cultural implications of the current political climate. Goodwin argues that the radicalization of the elite class has led to a significant shift in societal values, where ideological conformity is prioritized over open debate and discussion. He believes that this has created a vacuum in which alternative voices, such as those of the Reform Party, can gain traction. Goodwin expresses concern about the future of British society, particularly in light of demographic changes driven by mass immigration. He warns that the current trajectory could lead to a population trap, where the capacity of the state to provide essential services is overwhelmed by rapid demographic shifts. He advocates for a pro-family culture that encourages higher birth rates and supports families, drawing parallels to successful policies implemented in countries like Israel.